You know that episode of Band of Brothers where Lieutenant Spears of the 101st runs through an entire German defense to hook up with another section of the army and then runs all the way back and makes it alive? This is how I felt when I was playing this game. I don't know why, but everything just went really well. I had the Thompson with the extended mags and I was running towards the enemy and shooting them. There were a couple of revives, but we ended up on 32-0. Very good game and kind of fun to watch. So I wanted this to be the backdrop to today's video, as it's almost time for the next BF5 update, the first of 2019, and I think that most players would agree that the game really needs it. With that in mind, thanks to some developer updates via Twitter and Reddit, we've already got a pretty good idea of most things that are coming in next week's patch. First up though, next week is when the next chapter of Tides of War starts, called Lightning Strikes, and that will begin, now we know, on the 17th of January and it will end in March. During this time, we're going to get a new co-op mode, as well as a new Grand Operation and 2 new game modes. One is a mode that we don't have all that info on yet, called Squad Conquest, and the other is Rush. Sadly, it's going to be around for a limited time, so play it while you can. And we've also got some more info thanks to a very small teaser trailer and banner image for the new chapter. The one thing the banner seems to emphasize is vehicles, and there's a new Axis tank in there that we'll talk about in a second. But from that banner at least, it seems that this next chapter could be more vehicle based than the previous. We don't get a proper trailer for it until next week. I think Monday it's coming out, but the new tank that you can see in the banner is called the Sturmgeschtz 4, or the Stug 4, which was a German assault gun variant of the Panzerfaust, and it was used towards the end of the Second World War. That of course doesn't mean it's the only new vehicle that we'll see, we simply don't know yet. And there's a good chance though that this chapter could try and focus on the German blitzkrieg across Europe. And we'll definitely be getting more weapons and cosmetics too when they officially get announced. I'm sure I'll let you know. And while players are of course interested in the new content that the game is bringing, I think what's going to change and be improved is probably what players are more interested in right now, the core gameplay. Thanks to Drunksy and Jacob, they're 2 devs on the game, we've been given a brief look at what's changed and improved when the patch does drop. This is just a sample of what's coming because the actual patch notes are apparently 10 pages long and will drop before the patch releases next week. So first up, there's going to be some big improvements with the death experience. That sounds nice. This is done in a few different ways, but essentially it's trying to make it easier to understand who killed you and how. Right now in the game, the damage indicators are not very reliable as they sometimes come from the wrong direction. There are improvements to that too, as well as improved accuracy of the representation of incoming bullets from other players. One thing that players will absolutely be happy with is the improvement to vaulting and running up slopes. Little video here from a dev. Most players will have experienced moments where you try and vault over something or run up a hill and it just doesn't work. Very frustrating. So big improvements there. Jacob said too they've improved vaulting in other ways. So you'll no longer take damage incorrectly when vaulting over objects, and vaulting should no longer trigger against steep hills and slopes. I'm glad that stuff will be fixed. Improved ragdoll physics is also in the update, which should make the ragdolls look better in most situations, including when getting killed by explosives. Jacob said too, get this, that the Stucker siren has been made louder. I know that's not a big fix, but apparently players wanted it, so it's here, you'll be able to hear it. Also more improvements to player animations when in vehicles. Now, arguably one of the best changes I've heard so far is that the Panzerfaust is now once again going to be a one-hit kill against planes. I still don't really understand why this was removed in the first place and why the damage was nerfed. It made very little sense to me because it's a really high skill thing to do, but at least now those battlefield moments can return. Nothing worse than landing a sick panzer shot prediction on a plane only for it to carry on going and take 60 damage like nothing ever happened. Footstep audio is one of the biggest complaints that I've heard from players, and that's going to change to footstep audio when walking and sprinting is going to be louder, but crouching and crawling will generate less sound. So there's more of a balance here between sneaking and running. Maybe that will introduce it as a stealth mechanic. So if you want to sneak, you're going to have to move slowly or you're going to be heard. As to whether this will make a big difference to a lot of players with so many explosions and ambient noise going off, we'll have to see. Moving on, let's talk about Zoom Transition Sensitivity Smoothing. What the hell's that, Jack? Bit of a mouthful. Well, it's a new setting under Advanced Controls, and in basic terms, it smooths out the sensitivity when you aim down the sight. And this only applies to you though if you're not using Universal Soldier Aiming. So let's give an example. If you're playing with, say, a 15% mouse or controller sensitivity, but you've got a 50% ADS sensitivity, your sense of course gets slower when you ADS with a scope on a sniper rifle, for instance. Currently, this sensitivity change happens when you press the button rather than the scope appearing, and this can be quite jarring. So if you're playing with Universal Soldier Aiming on, this sensitivity is already smoothed out automatically for you as part of the system. If you choose not to use Universal Soldier Aiming though, then you're using the legacy aiming system, and you can find that sometimes when you ADS, noticing that sensitivity change can feel a bit unusual and sticky. So this new setting will mean that the transition will be a lot smoother for you. It's a nice quality of life change for those players who don't want to use Universal Soldier Aiming for whatever reason. As well as that, there are some changes to recoil when crouched and prone. First of all, you should be aware that right now when you crouch you get less recoil. This is of course true when you go prone. So right now you get a 30% reduction in recoil when you crouch, but that's changing to 25%. When prone, it was a 50% reduction, and that will now be 40%. So it's being nerfed in a way. It's going to be interesting to see how much this impacts certain weapons. I bet most players didn't even know that anyway. And speaking of weapons, arguably the worst class in the game is Medic right now. I've seen a few thoughts on this though. Some players think the Medic is in a good spot, and if you use it correctly, you'll do okay, while others think they aren't that viable at all. Either way, the SMGs are getting a buff in this patch with the goal of improving their mid-range combat. Now I think the main issue is that up close they aren't always strong enough to take on the assault players, and that's their primary range. Even still, let's see how this change pans out. They're going to be stronger at mid-range. I hope they don't go too strong with them. And they are getting reductions in recoil and an increase in accuracy to allow the SMGs to maintain damage over enemies at medium ranges. DICE have said that they fixed an issue with the SMGs too, where they were inaccurate for too long when going from sprinting to firing, which could have amplified the feeling of them not being very accurate most of the time. And we should talk about company coin too. This has been a big issue with BF5 since launch, and I'm sure that if you played the game for any length of time, you've encountered it. In short, when you reach max rank for the game, you can do that pretty quick, you no longer accrued company coin. And if you do, it's not always the correct amount. And that meant that players have been left in a bad situation because all of the weapon and vehicle specializations require company coin, as do all of the cosmetics in the game. Without a proper amount of coin, a lot of players have been left unable to finish specializing some weapons and vehicles, or not being able to buy the cosmetics that they want. As you can imagine, this has not been received well at all. DICE have of course been looking into this since launch of the game, but the issue apparently was so complicated that they've only just now been able to get it fixed. But a word of warning, and I don't understand this, they sadly can't confirm right now that it's fixed for everyone. So the community manager Dan Mitre posted an update on Reddit that said the problem seems to have been with one of their back-end scripts that checks players' ranks against certain actions such as unlocking weapons, assignments and the end of round screen. Because this system is so in-depth and complicated, they've got to be very careful when changing anything to ensure that it didn't in turn break something else along the way. What Dan was able to confirm though is the amount of company coin you should be receiving. The example he gave was a player with a 500 to 999 score would earn 25 company coin, and a player with 1000 to 1999 score would end up with 50 company coin. This means that the higher score you have at the end of the game, the more company coin you'll potentially earn. Importantly, DICE are still going to retroactively award players who have missed out on company coin, and they're currently working on doing that and ensuring that the current system is now working as intended. It's worth noting though that the end of round screen might not show the correct amount of company coin, but they should update correctly in your inventory. With the possibility of purchasable currency being added to the game immediately, it was very important that DICE fixed this problem, but I still think that it's left a sour taste in a lot of players' mouths. Another thing that Drunksy mentioned is that while there haven't been any massive netcode improvements in this patch, there have been some small changes, and bigger changes will come in future patches. We of course know that there's been a serious bug in the game since launch related to time to death. Essentially, the feeling that you're dying way too fast or in one frame. It's something that DICE have acknowledged and say they've been working hard to fix. David Serland recently said on Twitter that they've confirmed a big time to death bug fix for super bullets is working in their general gameplay testing, and they are now looking to testing it more scientifically, and hopefully we should see implementation of it pretty soon. When we'll see this though, and any other big netcode changes, isn't really clear right now, but at least DICE are getting to the bottom of some of the big bugs in the game that have been frustrating players. I do believe that DICE are working hard to fix most of the issues with the game, but of course players don't always see or know that. And with the game releasing just before the holiday period, I think it's just made the issue of getting regular updates and fixes appear worse because people have been off on holiday. In January we are getting 2 updates, and hopefully we should be looking at 2 updates per month going forward. For me, DICE right now need to focus on getting rid of some of the really bad bugs in the game, as well as overhauling the assignment system and improving the UI. There's been no mention of the assignment system, which is really sad. Visibility is still an issue on certain levels, FL and Devastation the worst offenders. So now December is over, let's hope that with this new chapter of Tides of War, DICE can get a real handle and grip on the problems with the game and set it off in the right direction, and then work on new content. We'll see. So there it is guys, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.